Hi everyone, and welcome to Katie Couric. Back in 1994, when I still thought the symbol meant about, my guest was already starting a foundation with all the money he made running Microsoft. Today I tweeted about that, so I've obviously come a long way, and so has he. Through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, nearly $24 billion of grant money has been awarded for global health and development projects all around the world. Bill Gates, thanks so much for joining us. Nice to see you. First and foremost, let me ask you about kind of just the overall mood of the world, if you will. I know that this is a time, obviously, given the recession and the global recession, that a lot of countries are focusing on cutting spending and reducing deficits. Do you worry about the impact that will have on foreign aid in general?
Yes. A lot of that foreign aid now goes for things like children's vaccines or AIDS drugs to keep people alive. And the impact of this money in terms of not only saving lives, but allowing kids to develop their full abilities, reducing the population growth, the benefits are pretty phenomenal. And yet as rich countries cut back, some will do like the UK and protect this money, continue to increase the things that are for the poorest, and some will not.
I know that much of your annual letter is focused this year on the campaign to eradicate polio, a disease that struck fewer than 1,500 people last year. And yet you mentioned there are 33 million people living with AIDS, and that in 2009, more than 780,000 people died from malaria. So I'm curious, why the focus on polio this year? What captured your imagination when it comes to this particular disease?
We spend the majority of our money on health issues, but polio rises to the top because we have a unique opportunity over the next several years to eradicate the disease. Only smallpox was ever eradicated, so this would be the second. And if you don't intensify, if you don't raise the money and get it down to zero, it'll come back, and that means it'll be crippling and killing over 100,000 kids a year. So the value of making sure you've got the budget and the intensity to get rid of it, it pays off unbelievably because no child will ever be crippled again.
Do you think a lot of people will be surprised to hear that polio hasn't already been eradicated? Because certainly when most Americans think of this disease, they think of the 1950s and they think of the vaccine that I know I took when first grade when they gave you those little sugar cubes. And why hasn't it been completely eradicated worldwide?
Well, the rich countries have done a great job of eradication, and rich countries take care of themselves, that's fine. In 1988, when it was gone from the rich countries, it was still killing or paralyzing over 300,000. And that's when people said, this is such an injustice. Let's raise the money and get rid of it. And now we're close. 99% of the cases are gone, but it's going to take making sure that there's more generosity, making sure there's that intensity, and then we'll get it. And that'll be a great thing for money saved, kids' lives improved, also to galvanize the whole global health enterprise.
I know that Abu Dhabi has pledged $17 million. Great Britain has pledged another $62 million towards the effort. What more will it take to get rid of polio once and for all? How much more money will be needed? And do you think the international community is going to show similar, acts of generosity?
Well, it hangs in the balance because the term aid is a vague term to people, and they don't connect the portion that is so critical, so effective. The campaign costs almost $1 billion a year. For the next 2 years, we have $700 million more that we've got to raise. So I'd be stunned if we let the financial piece be the reason that we let this disease get back out and spread around. But it's going to take articulating that everyone has to do their part.
Where are most cases of polio currently found?
There are 4 countries where we never stop transmission: Nigeria in Africa, India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. And what happens is that the virus gets out of those countries and reinfects places that were polio-free. This year in both Nigeria and India, we cut the cases by 80%. And so the big numbers are these escape cases where it got to Congo, or Tajikistan. Looking at it, Pakistan's going to be one of the toughest, but now they've committed to a whole new plan. I'm actually pretty impressed with what's going on. This thing, I really believe in it. It can succeed. We need the resources.
How has Pakistan responded?
Well, they're embarrassed that they were the only country to have an increase in cases. Of course, they had a flood and some challenges, but even so, in the toughest situations, if you just find all the kids and get them the drops, you stop this disease. So the governor of the key part of Pakistan has met with us. I met with the president and the health ministry people. I'm learning a lot about Pakistan and seeing that they are energized. They have this new national emergency plan. They've got to keep their energy on it because there's a lot of things they could be distracted by. But the donors who give money there are making it clear they expect a lot.
You have said you want this to be the decade of vaccines. Can you sort of spell out for folks the impact of not vaccinating kids and how it really does have a ripple effect that affects jobs, that affects the population explosion, that really impacts all areas of life?
Well, when you give aid, you don't just want to save lives. You want to create the conditions so that country can be self-sustaining and a reasonable place to live. Vaccines do that because they not only save the lives, they allow the kid, because they're not sick, to develop their potential. They also have families decide to have less children because they know more of the kids will survive to adulthood. And so that means whether you care about the environment, you care about jobs, stability, these health interventions, which are actually a pretty small part of the aid budget, but definitely at risk in the United States and other places right now, that's what's catalytic. That's what makes a difference. And that's why I've chosen to have that be the top priority for the foundation. And of the 9 million children who die every year, we can cut that in half during this decade of vaccines if we do the right things.
What other kind of vaccines are you talking about, Bill, when you want this to be the decade of vaccines? Against what other diseases?
Yeah, there's about 6 or 7 that we need. Malaria, tuberculosis, AIDS, some respiratory and diarrheal diseases. So if we got all of those, then you simply need to get them out. And again, that requires funding, but it's very doable. This is the few percent of health activities that the majority of all health benefit comes from. And then you start to see a country that's feeding itself better and educating and then they're simply taking care of themselves.
What do you think about the small vocal minority of anti-vaccine advocates who have surfaced here in this country? Do you see that having any kind of impact? As we know, it's all the research and science has disproved this, but there is a group of people that cling to the notion that vaccines are associated with, for example, autism. And I just wondered, do you think this is going to make this an even greater challenge for you?
Yeah, what happens, the vaccines have been proven to be safe, and we are super, super careful about that. And so the data that's been gathered, the kids who don't get vaccinated, they end up getting things like measles or pertussis. They die, they infect other kids. So there's thousands who've died because of that anti-vaccine rhetoric. Fortunately, in most places, that's not a problem. Mothers know that the vaccine is very good. Even in polio, we had rumors in Nigeria against the vaccine, and we had to work hard, get all the religious leaders there to say, no, this is good for you. We don't want paralyzed children.
Let's talk about the letter. In your letter, you hint at some impatience in the fight against AIDS. What are the biggest obstacles? Because many people in this country are living quite long and fulfilling lives with sort of a whole cocktail of certain medications.
Yes, in the United States, we fund drug treatment. You still don't want to get HIV, but it's not something that you typically die of. Now, the number of people with AIDS worldwide, particularly in Africa, is so large that there will never be enough funding for all of them to go under treatment. And so the only way to save lives is to focus on prevention. Yes, we should be generous on the treatment piece, but that we aren't going to scale up to make that the total solution. And so as we come along with new things that can prevent transmission, male circumcision, there's a gel a woman can use, a pill you can take. We need to get those rolled out, and that the path to get them into widespread use has been very slow, because you have any time someone in the United States or in the country involved says, let's wait, you just get delays. So I'm hoping we can reduce some of those delays and get a lot more prevention. Then the number of people that you need to treat is greatly reduced.
Are there cultural obstacles in getting some of those preventative strategies enacted in certain communities?
No, it's actually the regulatory things in the U.S. and these countries that hold us back. We thought with taking young men and asking them to be circumcised, there would be cultural resistance to that. But in fact, it's the bureaucracy and regulatory that's held it back. They understand, and actually the demand has been way greater than I would have expected.
You also care deeply about education. You were interviewed for the documentary Waiting for Superman. It's something that you've invested in heavily. Are you worried about sort of this I guess, necessity to cut spending in some areas, that as a result of that, either at the state or federal level, that education is going to be kind of, left on the cutting room floor, or at least cut back so significantly it's going to have a huge impact on how our kids are being educated right now?
Well, it would be great if we could keep increasing the amount of money we spend on education. It's a key area. Because of the rise in healthcare costs, because of bad accounting about pensions and early retirement, it's going to be very few states that are increasing their education spending. So we need to make sure we're getting as much as we can, that we are keeping the best teachers, we're helping those teachers improve, we're using technology, and that's where our foundation funds pilots and is trying to help out. But it will be a tough time. We need to look at this and say, why are some teachers so much better than others? Can we spread that? And there's been a lot of resistance to that.
Because of the unions?
Well, people like the status quo, and they ask their union to maintain that sometimes. AFT, which is one of the unions, has been more open-minded to trying new things. But this is going to be a critical period, because other countries' education systems are now quite a bit better than ours. And yet we spend by far more. And part of that is that they only keep the teachers that are good, and they help those teachers get better.
And is that the biggest obstacle? Because when you do look at the U.S. and in terms of global competitiveness, and you see that U.S. kids are 31st in the world when it comes to math and science, which I think is the latest figure. Is it the good teachers and the way teachers are recruited and basically nurtured? Do you see that as the real key to making the United States competitive in this area again?
It's the thing that we can change that in many countries has worked to their benefit. If we could change and everybody grew up in a nice middle-class suburban household, that would raise our numbers too.
But had early childhood education,
Well, that actually, that's relative to the expense of the long-term benefit there compared to things like long school day in middle school or the teacher personnel system. It'd be great if we could do all these things, but the household influence there, kind of stuck that in the inner city, those kids don't get a rich environment. Some school environments where they have great teachers have shown that even the kids there with the bad economics, not much early exposure, that over 90% of those kids can get motivated and end up in four-year colleges.
What did you think of President Obama's State of the Union address, which really focused on innovation and kind of investment in education in this country? Did you agree with that message? And I'm assuming you did, given all that you care about.
Absolutely. The work that the president has pushed for, along with the Secretary of Education, to learn from charter schools, to look at teacher measurement, that's a good thing. But in terms of resources, the fact is that because no one's figured out how to stop medical costs from exploding. It's not really even very focused on. The key in education is going to have to be getting more for what we spend. It's not like net will be able to have big increases in the years ahead. So being smart, who's doing it well, how to use technology, being willing to change from a pure seniority type approach. It looks like that's going to be the best way to improve education.
Meanwhile, you and Warren Buffett, 58 billionaires, have signed on to your giving pledge along with Mr. Buffett. And I know you recently went to China and India to talk with philanthropists in those countries. But I'm just curious, since so much emphasis these days is on global competitiveness, what do you think the Chinese or the Indians are doing differently that perhaps could be applied here in the United States? Anything?
Well, the main thing that China and India have done well is they've copied the parts of our system that work well. We were the most serious about education. We were the most serious about science and engineering and research funding. And at the same time that they copied those good things we did, they didn't copy the size of our defense budget, the size of our medical expenses, the legal overhead. There's a lot of things that they said, okay, you can keep working on that. And that's good. I mean, the fact that they're going to be innovating, whether it's in energy or new medicines, the fact that China doesn't need aid. Within a decade, I think India will get to the point where it can support its own needs. That's great, because then the number of countries that need support is lower. They should remind us of the need to renew what we do best. We let smart people come into the country. We could do better than that. We had great teaching. We can do better than we've been on that. So we're still the leader, and they're doing well is not a bad thing for us. But we have kind of stayed the same, and there's some long-term investments that mean still keeping some money on the young, even as health care and pension costs explode, is going to be politically very difficult.
Do you still believe in American exceptionalism, or do you think this country in some ways has jumped the shark?
Well, America got out in front on innovation. It encouraged risk-taking. I'm a huge beneficiary of the U.S. education system, the U.S.
Although you dropped out of college.
True, but I still, many of the people I hired did not drop out of college. And so that has been the best in the world. If people think that we're exceptional in the sense that other people can't see what we do well, then they're just deluding themselves. But we're a wonderful country that's done the best. We have good times ahead, but we have to keep some of the resources on the productive investments, not simply the early retirement or things like that.
As somebody who is a real pioneer in the computer age, what do you make of the role the internet has been playing in these uprisings in Egypt? Does it surprise you, or is it something that you anticipated happening?
Well, whenever communications gets better, governments that thrive by restricting information find it very difficult. Today, really, probably only North Korea has a situation where they can hide information. And even there, DVDs seem to be getting into the country, and it's tougher and tougher for them. In the case of Egypt, they actually shut the internet down, so it's no longer a tool, but people are still finding other ways of communicating. So whether it's learning with your children, or understanding about diseases in faraway places, or understanding that other governments are doing a better job, the internet is a phenomenal tool. And it's fun to have been involved in it and see that it keeps getting better. In many ways, like in education or generosity, I think there's still a lot to be invented.
Are you surprised that Mubarak was able to shut down the internet and keep information from reaching people at this critical time, or is this, not that surprising to you?
Well, it's not that hard to shut the internet down if you have military power where you can tell people that that's what's going to happen. Now, we still have handheld video cameras and lots of coverage coming out, so there's an awareness. And whenever you do something extraordinary like that, you're sort of showing people that you're afraid of the truth getting out. So it's a very difficult tactic, but certainly it can be shut off.
And finally, when you think about the role that technology is now playing in our lives 24/7, and when you were a young man who decided to focus on computers, dropped out of Harvard, and really spent your time really perfecting and understanding the way computers work, I mean, are you even sometimes amazed at how far technology has come? I go back to that 1994 conversation I had with Brian Gumbel, and we were discussing, what is the internet exactly? I mean, just think about that. That was, 16 years ago or so. And just in such a short period of time, it has just become the epicenter of our lives in so many ways.
It's fantastic. And some of it proceeded very quickly. There are a few things, the way we learn in school isn't that much changed, but it will be. The way that we do medical records, even the way we read, we're just at the beginning. Robots are still in the early stage. And so the digital revolution has a lot more change coming, all of which gives us choices, will help us out. So, I love watching it. And now I get to think about, okay, how can these advances help the poorest people in the world? Help scientists discover new vaccines, help us check whether a kid has been vaccinated, help poor people save money. So now I'm looking at it, but with a slightly different frame of reference than in my early career.
And do you see any downside to the advent of this technological revolution?
Well, the new tools empower all sorts of things, good people, bad people, and overall, it's a very positive thing. But to the degree that nuclear bomb plans or terrorist organizations can use these tools, that's a bad thing. You get, some things like spam. You got parents who've got to make sure their kids balance how they spend the time well. All of those things.
A lot of sedentary children who are getting fat.
Well, TV did that.
Well, computers, I think, help them gain a few more lbs.
Well, their finger muscles are much better now. So, yeah, we have to watch out when these things come along. But, people are curious. People want to learn. If people are suffering even far away, they'd like to know something about that and help out. So I see it as overwhelmingly a positive development.
All right. Well, Bill Gates, thank you so much for talking with us. Good luck with this latest effort to eradicate polio. And do you have a set time, which you're, a target date, if you will, for the eradication of this disease?
We don't pick an exact time. We have some big things we need to get done in the next 2 years. And so, the next 3 to 5 years, we should be very close.
All right. Well, thanks very much. And thanks to all of you for watching. You can follow me on Twitter. My handle is @KatieCouric. And you can see all the episodes of our web show anytime at cbsnews.com.